What are these?
I've been asked to come out here and entertain you.
With his lantern jaw, his towering height, and his booming voice,
Grandpa, forget it!
he will be forever known as the Munster with the heart of a child. But off-screen, Fred Gwynne endured personal tragedy and professional setbacks to emerge as an accomplished artist, a respected author, and one of the finest character actors of his generation.
We learn as we go.
His face was very stoic, yet there was a lot of emotion in what was going on behind it.
I'd like to speak to you in my chambers.
Fred was not the Hollywood Anglo-Saxon handsome, so acting was a way of, see, I'm as good as.
They love me out there. I got them right in the palm of my hand.
As a TV dad, he was the best you could ask for.
I'm doing this for Eddie.
It was like this very small, shy person in this huge presence of a man.
My father was very, very funny, a talented artist, a generous man with a very, very loud voice.
That's what I heard!
Fred Gwynne was just a great big teddy bear.
New York City in the 1920s. The Great War was over. The economy was thriving. And the blue bloods of Manhattan's cafe society were kicking up their heels at speakeasies around the town. It was in this atmosphere of parties and privilege that Frederick Hubbard Gwynne was born on July 10, 1926. His father, Frederick, was a successful stockbroker whose gregarious and whimsical personality delighted his young son. Fred's mother, Dorothy, was a strong-willed and artistic woman who had created the popular comic strip Sonny Jim. But once her son was born, Fred became the center of her universe.
She had tried to have children before him, and I think 2 or 3 had died. So he was sort of a miracle baby for her, and she, just showered him with praise and love and attention.
Doted on by his mother, Fred enjoyed all the benefits that wealth allowed as he came of age surrounded by America's aristocracy.
I remember Fred telling me that in the wintertime, his dad used to have a house down in Palm Beach in Florida, right next to Joe Kennedy's house. So they moved in those kinds of circles.
But in 1935, the 8-year-old's idyllic existence ended when his father unexpectedly died after a routine sinus operation. Shattered by the loss of the man he adored, the lonely youngster often withdrew into an imaginary world he created in his sketches, a talent he shared with his mother.
He was always drawing, and I'm sure that his mother loved it since she was a cartoonist herself, and so she would encourage him to do that. You couldn't keep a pen out of his hands.
Fred's mother also nurtured him through his awkward years at school, when a sudden growth spurt set the adolescent apart from his peers.
Can you imagine a kid who was that tall and gangly, and you'd think he would be ostracized more than embraced? And I think his mother just made him feel so comfortable with himself that he was just very well liked.
In 1939, 13-year-old Fred entered Groton, an elite and highly competitive East Coast prep school. Fred became an outgoing and popular student. He sang in the school choir, and he excelled in his art classes, studying under the noted portrait artist R.S. Merriman. As the young student's passion for art grew, he studied everything from the Impressionist to the 19th century political cartoons of Honoré Daumier. He also joined the drama program, which allowed him to express his whimsical personality. But throughout Gwynne's high school years, a dark cloud hung over the young men at Groton. In 1941, America entered the Second World War, and patriotic teens everywhere were eager to fight for their country. When Fred graduated in 1944, he immediately enlisted in the United States Navy. For 2 years, the 6'5" seaman served aboard a subchaser in the Pacific as a radio operator.
You almost went insane. The Morse code constantly in your ear, going on and keeping up. He wept before the captain, he said, because he wanted to get out of it. He'd do anything, so he wept. And somebody said, "Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" But he got out of radio duty.
After 2 years at sea, Gwynne was ready for an intellectual challenge, which he found at Harvard University. It was here that the undergraduate discovered an outlet for his artistic talent and wicked wit on the staff of the Harvard Lampoon, joining forces with fellow classmates John Updike and George Plimpton. By 1950, Fred's gift for satire had catapulted him to the presidency of the notorious humor magazine. Gwynne also lent his towering presence to the university's Hasty Pudding Society, where his outrageous antics became legendary around campus.
The Hasty Pudding is a theater group where there are no women, so the men dress as women, and you can imagine, he just had a ball. Loved to make people laugh.
Gwynne basked in the attention he received from an audience, and the campus clown was anxious to test his skills outside the Ivy League. Fred began performing at the nearby Brattle Theater Company, where he quickly became enchanted with the colorful and eccentric world of the stage. Romance also cast a spell over the Harvard student when he met 22-year-old Foxy Renard at a friend's wedding.
And I think for my father it was love at first sight. My mother was very beautiful, and I'm not sure it went the other way.
But Fred was captivated by the free-spirited young woman and pursued her ardently.
Well, we liked each other. He was shy, he was very funny. I mean, I appreciate humor a lot.
After a year-long courtship, the couple tied the knot in a small ceremony on June 30th, 1952. The newlyweds became popular hosts to a large circle of friends who were charmed by Fred's acerbic sense of humor.
He was an introvert, but he might trick people into thinking he was an extrovert. He would be on for a lot of people. You know, he'd play a role and they'd think that they were very popular with him, haha, till they'd leave and he'd say, "Oh Christ, what bores."
After a successful run as Bottom in the Brattle Theater production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, the 25-year-old performer felt emboldened enough to try his luck in the Big Apple. New York in the early 1950s was the artistic hub of the country. The new medium of television was thriving, and Broadway was producing some of its biggest hits. Fred and Foxy moved into a modest apartment, and Fred hit the pavement looking for work. But initially, he met some resistance.
People said he was too tall or too thin or, you know, had a lantern jaw or something. But then, obviously, other people saw that he had talent. People were just swept up by that.
The novice actor quickly landed his first Broadway show with a supporting role in Mrs. McThing, starring the illustrious Helen Hayes. The following year, Fred was overjoyed at the birth of his first son, Kieran. But the new father's elation quickly turned to heartache when Kieran suffered a severe brain injury that left him mentally disabled.
He had a subdural hematoma when he was about a year and a half and had brain surgery, which in those days the scar went from ear to ear. And from the surgery he developed epilepsy and had grand mal seizures, which was very hard. My father needed to have a perfect son. So I think it was hard, as it is for any parents, to have a child that isn't exactly perfect. And that it was the first child was harder still.
To escape his anguish, Gwynne threw himself into his work. In 1954, Fred made the acquaintance of director Elia Kazan, who gave him a bit part as one of Lee J. Cobb's henchmen in On the Waterfront. That same year, Foxy gave birth to a daughter, Gaynor. Although he had little interest in the day-to-day tasks of fatherhood, Fred grew to be a delightful companion for his children.
They all adored him. They all thought he was very funny, you know, and great fun, but he didn't do much. And he'd go off in the studio and spend hours there, painting or learning the guitar or something, and so he wasn't really involved.
But Gwynne took his responsibilities as a breadwinner seriously. With the cost of Kieran's special needs escalating, Fred accepted a job as a copywriter at the J. Walter Thompson Advertising Agency. For the next 5 years, he juggled his ad job with a variety of stage and television appearances, including roles in such prestigious live shows as Studio One and Kraft Television Theater.
He had a wonderful boss who said, you know, if you have a job, I'll fix it so you can take the time off and do it. So that was fairly unheard of. So he worked quite a lot.